But first, let's raise the big question. That big question is on Operation Sindoor. Remember, that's been a major flashpoint since we did the last tracker in February 2025. The Pahalgam terror attack and what followed. First question, how do people perceive the Modi government's response to Operation Sindoor? Rate that response. 55% in the survey said it was strong. 15% said adequate, 21% said weak. So clearly there is a strong endorsement of what the government did in going into Pakistan territory and hitting Pakistan terror bases there. That gets a thumbs up. The other question that we asked, and this is just as contentious, what brought the ceasefire during Operation Sindoor? And here, opinion is more divided. 31% give credit to Prime Minister Modi. 29% say pressure brought by Donald Trump. Remember, Donald Trump has repeatedly taken credit for ceasefire between India and Pakistan. And 25% say Pakistan's request to India. Add the 31 and 25, that's 56% who will not agree with what Donald Trump says. 15% say don't know or can't say. So interesting how Operation Sindoor is playing out a few months later in the public theatre. Let's get first comments. Geeta, are you surprised with those numbers? Most people believe the government did give a strong response. About 55% say that it was good. Another sizable chunk says it was adequate. 21% said it was weak. Surprised or not?
Well, a little surprised in the numbers, but yes, the fact that they're saying it is good, that the response was needed, is something that I agree with. But the fact that there are others, Rajdeep, who are actually saying that it was not adequate surprises me, because we did think that this was a marked shift to what India did in the past. We've never entered Pakistan's Punjab territory. The fact that the response was to terrorism and terror infrastructure was dismantled. So yes, the numbers do surprise me in terms of the adequate and weak part. Not surprising when people are saying that this is something that has been good.
You know, it's interesting, Pranay, that when we did a similar mood of the nation after Balakot, the numbers were far more overwhelming. And we saw that in the elections also that followed in 2019, much more strident support. So there are two ways of looking at it. One, the government has, in a sense, convinced people that they've given an adequate response. The other way to look at it, there doesn't seem to be that sizable Sindoor bump of support in the way we saw after Balakot. Do you agree with that? And if so, why? Why is that?
Razi, but if you see these numbers, the overwhelming majority supports the government response and the need for a response. See,
right.
people want more, or people wanted more. Those who say that
Dil
the
mange
response
more.
Exactly, the Dil Mange More was the moment, and you remember that photograph which were very which circulated during the Kargil operation also, where the Indian soldiers and Indian airmen wrote on those missiles and then bombs that Dil Mange More. So those kind of things. If you see this breakup, 55% supported government's response, 21% found that the response was not adequate, but still they support. The overwhelming majority wanted government of India to respond to this thing, and the response should be military response. So here we see that people are in support of the thing. The way it happened, also people wanted that we should have got something tangible. Look, the mood of the nation.
Tangible?
So exactly. Government has to calibrate its response because, based on the military requirement, based on the political situation, there are very many considerations. And also, people like you and many people, those who think that, this was a very measured and a very calculated thing and a mature decision to go for a ceasefire, because, otherwise it would have dragged India to another long battle where we have seen what kind of geopolitics is this. But
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Rajdeep, I think the adequate and weak percentages come from the fact that there was a lot, there were a lot of people who came out and said that the ceasefire was too early. If you wanted to then just finish the job rather than go in for a ceasefire that's been called, and you are saying that it was called by Pakistan. So why stop at that? Why not have 2 more days where you can actually have a substantial loss for the Pakistani establishment and the army?
Okay, let's bring in Yashwant Deshmukh, because Yashwant, what we are seeing from these first numbers, a majority of the people feel India has given either a strong or adequate response to Pakistan, 70% in all. When it comes to ceasefire, what brought the ceasefire, it's much more divided. 31% say it's Prime Minister Modi who did it. 29% seem to have bought into the Donald Trump theory. Is that one reason, one explanation why we haven't seen a kind of Sindoor bump of huge popularity for the Prime Minister, the government, in the manner that we saw after Balakot? Of course, the elections after Balakot were just weeks after, so that also may have had an impact. But is there a distinction you draw between the mood post-Balakot and post-Sindoor?
I think that is one of the reasons, Rajiv. But I also believe that suppose if Donald Trump wouldn't have tweeted or said anything, was Indian public looking at the scenario as like, okay, that was an adequate and good enough response? Probably, let me say it this way. I mean, barring our channel, of course, I think what this government lost the narrative was big time because of the circus that was going around in many of the other TV stations here in Noida. I mean, because public is consuming that kind of telecast, and the hype that was created and the expectation which were taken up, from Lahore mein ghus gaye to Karachi dubo diya kind of thing. I think people were just looking at that, and then even the best of the scenario which was already done by the army started looking like as if it was underachieved, or it was called too soon, or it was something like, an aborted mission of sort. So I definitely, Donald Trump's tweet and other thing, that mediation thing and the narrative was lost somewhere there. But I also genuinely believe somewhere down the line, this TV circus thing, that derailed the narrative around the
I think there's a lesson in that, but Preeti, you wanted to jump in.
There's a lesson in that, but Rajdeep, I don't blame the television circus around the news anymore. And I'll tell you, because I really do feel there was a lack of communication by the government at that time. When did the government come out and rebut that tweet of Donald Trump? Did we hear anything from the Prime Minister? Did we hear really anything from the government? The communication at that point of time was weak and could have been
also,
stronger.
the whole controversy over jets, whether jets were being downed or not. Pakistan ran away with that narrative internationally.
Yeah, what seemed, at least, in terms of the optics, was that we were being defensive. And as a country, especially in a time like this, we have never been defensive. We have always taken the offensive stand. Be it Balakot, it was the political narrative that was built was full of Desh Bhakti and nationalism. Here, there seems to be a bit of dithering. And of course, because we are walking a very tight diplomatic, rope, especially with the United States, we had to recalibrate a lot. But in terms of the information and communication, personally, I think the government got it wrong. If we could have come up with a very strong response directly after that tweet and in days to come and not take, not be defensive, the numbers would have been very different.
Yes. Maria.
Rajdeep, look, what Preeti says, I'll just take that thread a little ahead.
Sure.
The first communication that ceasefire has been agreed upon came from where? It came from the US administration. Let's rewind now. The first time the Prime Minister speaks about Pahalgam terror attack of April 22nd is from Bihar. He sends a message that, and then he makes that shift from Hindi to English. And he addresses the international audience and goes on to say that from the soil of Bihar, I'm saying that every terrorist and their perpetrators and handlers will be traced, tracked, and neutralized. That was the nature of communication that was coming right from the top. But what happened in those 72 hours? In those 72 hours, India did manage to ensure that the communication is solid. You had the best display of strong women, officers coming out, Colonel Sophia Qureshi and Wing Commander Vyomika Singh, communicating to the country. They were effective. Everything went off well. It was that moment of ceasefire, the information for which came in from United States when the entire country was actually on that path, that there will be much more than what meets the eye.
Rajdeep, imagine if at that point of time there was address to the nation by the Prime Minister and say that Pakistan has begged us for a ceasefire, therefore we are, pulling back. And that's the reason why we are pulling back. The optics of this would have been another Balakot for the country.